Okay, so my name is Jared Payne. I'm going to be talking about my administration interview. I decided to go back to my high school in Valley Center. I interviewed Principal Lewis, or Jamie Lewis, that's his name. He's a real interesting guy. I had him in high school, and he's always really respectable, and you can talk to him. He's very approachable, and yeah, I decided to pick him. So yeah, here's pretty much what I asked him. So the first question was, how long you been a principal? How long did you teach prior to becoming an administrator? This is his 19th year as administrator, and he did teach before then. He taught 6 years, chemistry and biology, them sort of courses. And so then I asked him, what made you choose the teaching profession originally? He said, honestly, he started out wanting to do chemical engineering. And then he soon learned that he really had a good connection with kids and adults and just working with the individuals. And so, and he said he loved the process of watching them grow day by day, and, and just seeing that natural transition that you see. And so, yeah, that's what made him become a teacher. I asked him what advice you give me to prepare better for a teaching profession. He said, right now, I'm to continue to do what you're doing, staying in school, getting good grades and stuff. He says there's really a lot of darkness in the world right now just because of, things going on. And he just said, that teachers or administrators are just constantly getting hounded, and that, this hasn't always been the case, but just for right now, it just seems like it. And, teachers and stuff are looking to retire, and the job right now is just kind of tough. And but he just said really it's a really rewarding job, and that if you have that growth mindset, then you're just always going to be prepared for a teaching profession. And he also says don't expect to be Kansas Teacher of the Year. It is what it is, and try and just do what you do best. And so the fourth question I asked him was, what are some of the challenges I will face as a teacher? And then what are the rewards of teaching? And could you provide me some examples? And we said, academically, the biggest thing is that there's always going to be classroom management. You have to find the fine balance between being a friend and being a teacher, and, being kind to the students. If you become their buddy, he said they're pretty much kept it simple. They're gonna eat you alive. I thought that was really interesting, just because, I've seen that before where students get too comfortable in the classroom, and, it's kind of hard to watch because the teacher it didn't really seem they have any control, But he says that really the biggest thing is adapting as a teacher, because, teaching historically has always been sort of the same. You show up to your classroom, take attendance, that kind of stuff. But within the past 2 years, it's been completely different. And so the real question is, where will education be within the next 15 and 30 years, and how will you adapt to that? And he just says everything changes at a rapid pace at this moment. And he just says really identify what you want to do in the realm you want to be in, the environment. And he just says really teachers, because of how hard it's been with COVID and online teaching, teachers are leaving at a rapid pace. If they're retiring, they can retire. They can't get any subs. And just right now, it's really tough for him because he's trying to manage it. And, it's just been pretty crazy. But he says within the past, 10 years ago, if he had an application for, a history teacher or something like that, he would have 150 applications. Within the past 2 years, whenever he has a job opening there for a teaching job, he gets maybe 4. And so he says really it's not about what kind of job you can get, it's about what kind of job you want. But he says the most rewarding thing is really watching individuals grow from point A to point B, whether it be small or large growth. And And he even says not even just have to be students, it can be teachers. I mean, just watching teachers from year 1 teaching to, year 5 teaching, it's a huge difference. And, a lot of kids are coming from middle school and most are ready, and he just thinks it's really cool, and some aren't ready, and but there are a smaller percentage that do struggle academically, and to watch the ones, he says it's most rewarding to watch the struggling ones go from point A to point B, because they're the ones that, need it the most. And so that was just really interesting to me. So this was kind of where I started getting to the bigger questions. What does professionalism mean to you? What qualities do you seek in a teacher, and how can I stand out during the application, interview, or hiring process during a teaching license? So he really says professionalism is a two-way street. He says he likes to give teachers full range for what they need to do. So, if he likes to give leeway, he wants, if they have good ideas for ways to teach, he's going to let them do that. But on the same token, if they abuse that power, then that's when he steps in and does what he needs to do. But he does like give teachers leniency. He thinks that's the most effective, and he thinks that's what has made Valley teachers that he liked stand out, just because he gives them leniency. So sometimes he really says some admin really get caught up in the aesthetics, but he didn't really feel like he does. He really looks at, who you are and what kind of character that you are, because they can't grow character. Like, character's going to be there. But he does look at, like, if you send an application to him and there's a bunch of grammatical errors, well, then that's going to tell him that you didn't really take the time into caring about, what the teaching job that he has provided for you. Another interesting one is his name, Jamie Lewis, and so in the he'll get emails that say Mrs. Lewis. Well, it's a guy. His name's Mr. Lewis. So it's really interesting because he looks for people who take the genuine time to look at the grammatical errors, take the time to fill out the cover letters, spend time on it, show up on time for interviews, and just seem like a good person, And he says really another thing too is a social footprint, like he pointed out the thing with John Gruden with the, the race emails and stuff. It's like, well, if you're on Facebook and you're blabbing about, this and such, and you post pictures of you drinking every night and stuff like that, he's like, that does not look good on your end. So he says really be mindful on what you post, lock it up. And yeah, he really looks for that kind of red flags. And then he says networking is really important. He says, really get your name out there, and, whenever you're in the hiring sheet and you're neck and neck with somebody, but he asks this one person who, who should he pick? And they say, well, he's been doing, he's been working with the schools, he's been doing this. And so really networking will help you out a lot more in the long run. So the sixth question I asked him was, what changes would you make to the educational system? Consider various aspects of education reform, funding, state assessments, etc. So this was kind of the lengthier question. I really liked his answers in this because I really never thought about it as a student. But he says, as far as funding, it is a never-ending battle because you have to find a way to sustain positive change moving forward. You're going to have some kind of reform from the federal level no matter what. We all want reform, he said, but the biggest problem is sustainability. And he brings up this example. In the midst of my district level, we talk about different ways to produce assessments, do that. And he feels like he and others brings up good ideas on, maybe different projects, different research experiments. And it seems like every year it's just a research paper. Every year they have to write a paper. And to him, it's like, that's cool and all, but is that really efficient? And is that the best way for them to learn? And he just feels like sometimes he is locked in a place. sometimes, like with the board of region, you know, and he feels like, he really didn't have some say sometimes on what would be the most efficient, he thinks, for his kids and at the Valley Center School. And he brought up this, and this was probably the most important, one of the most key parts of this whole interview. So he says, by the board of region, they grade me on one thing. He gets graded on a regular basis, and they grade him on his college rate on how many kids he gets to college. And he says, they grade me on who I get to college, but they don't grade me on high school graduation success. They don't grade me on, giving a kid a meal when he might not get a meal at home, or, they don't grade him on making a kid feel safe when in his own home he doesn't feel safe. And that to me was just kind of groundbreaking. I didn't even think about that, and he's partnered with Kansas MD, mental health programs to provide clothing and food. And he just thinks it's like, really to him, it's unfair because his job isn't just about, sending kids to college or getting them a good degree. I mean, he pointed out they don't grade him on whether they get a job whenever they come out of high school or, any of that. He said they grade you strictly on college, who they send to college. And that was really interesting because I don't think I've ever had someone on my dad's side of the family go to college. And he met my mom, who was like 4 generations of college graduates. So that to me, was really interesting. And it's like, my dad, I think he's a great guy, and my mom is a great woman and stuff. So why should it matter that whether they go to college or not? And to me, that was just really interesting because I don't know, it really struck out, because he said they don't grade you on, they just care about college, where they get them to college. They don't care about, maybe what if you get them a job, the job opportunities they give you, that kind of stuff. So that was really interesting. He says another key flaw that he notices is with the teacher shortage. They're okay with, putting a sub in the classroom with no college background. But they're not okay with putting someone certified in a classroom. And that was pretty interesting to me. Let me look. And he was talking about, how his job is so stuck out to him because not only is he giving an education to kids, but he's giving them, food. They might not eat at home, or, he's giving them warmth whenever they walk in the door, and they might not get that at home. He talks about how, there's sometimes the high school might be their only source of health care. And that to me was just really, it struck hard because it was like, you don't know the extent of their job. And that to me was just really, really interesting. But he says, in the midst of it all, he does like to enjoys interacting with kids and admin stuff. But he says, but within the last 2 years, his job has just been hectic. He thinks teachers just don't get paid what they deserve. And there's some people that he says that think teachers don't deserve summer break, and it's like, why? They work so hard on getting your kids their education. Why don't they deserve summer break and stuff? And he says sometimes, I think this is with everybody, he thinks about sometimes just working on the dock and filling boats. That's his dream job. Like there's sometimes he thinks about just going away and just working on a dock. And I think everyone has that kind of escape job, like that dream job that they think about. And that was just really cool. So the seventh question I asked him, if you could choose any other career field, what would you, and please explain your answer in detail. He says, if I were younger, I would have explored sales. But again, he says he likes to work with people. So probably sales of some sort. But then he was talking about a job at the marina, like working on the docks and stuff. And I just think that's cool because, I think everyone deserves that kind of luxury, of just relaxing. But I thought it was really interesting how he keyed in on that. So then we ended on, are there any comments you wish to add to close this interview? And he says, don't think so. Just stick with it. But there are benefits to it, even if you discover it. Find that passion, run with it. Because not only will you find successes, but you will find successes with others. We also brought up the fact about how, in Valley, Valley is different from like inner city schools because, in inner city schools, they know they have problems like, drug problems and, different problems like that. But at Valley, we have some of the same problems as inner city, but we don't like to admit it. And he just thought that was interesting. They throw it on the rug, and it's like, why would you do that? Because that identifying the weaknesses don't help anybody, and he just thinks, oh, well, he pointed out because he said people just think Valley just some urban, agriculture area. In reality, we have a lot more problems than that, and they need to be addressed. But yeah, he was a really interesting guy. I really like to talk to him. He's a great guy. And yeah, that was my interview with him. My name is Jared Payne, and thank you.